As the Trump administration continues to wrongfully deport innocent people to an El Salvadorian concentration camp disguised as a prison, a lot of people on the left have been trying to make Trump supporters feel any amount of empathy for these innocent people who have been denied due process, desperately trying to help conservatives see the humanity in the people that Trump is hurting. Those attempts, unsurprisingly, are not going well. And the most common explanation that you are likely to hear from other people on the left is that, well, conservatives just aren't capable of feeling empathy for people who don't look or think like them, or for situations they've never experienced themselves. And there's a lot of evidence to back that assertion up. Just look at literally any tweet Meghan McCain has ever sent, or the scores of homophobic people who only realize queer folks aren't demons once their own kid comes out of the closet. But I still think the assertion is wrong. I think conservatives are capable of experiencing empathy. They just aren't capable of experiencing it outside of the context of their own morality. And I think it's really, really important that the rest of us learn what that means and how to use that knowledge to our advantage as fast as humanly possible if we want to save our democracy and limit the harm that the Trump administration and Elon Musk are gleefully causing to our most marginalized brothers and sisters. So let's talk about it. First of all, we need to define the difference between empathy and morality, because a lot of people use those terms almost interchangeably. Empathy, aka the ability to understand and share the feelings of others, plays a big role in morality, which is a system of values and principles rooted in the distinction of right versus wrong. Empathy can often motivate individuals to act morally by making them aware of the suffering or needs of others and inspiring them to help alleviate other people's pain or distress. But when we're living in a world where conservative evangelicals have begun throwing around phrases like, "don't commit the sin of empathy," it's clear that a not insignificant amount of Americans have begun viewing empathy as diametrically opposed to morality. And I think I can explain why, and how we can use that to our advantage. To explore this, I want to use an extreme but real-life example. Back in 2018, 5 teenagers as young as 14 made national news after they taunted and recorded 31-year-old Jamel Dunn, who was actively drowning and calling out to them for help. Not only did they not intervene or attempt to rescue Jamel in any way, they didn't even bother calling 911 or otherwise alerting anyone else who could help him, choosing instead to record and taunt Jamel as he died in front of them. Clearly, the teens had no empathy for Jamel, and I think we can all agree that their actions were immoral and disgusting. But I think they, at least at the time, would have argued otherwise, at least in regard to the morality, or lack thereof, in their actions. You see, as they watched him drown, one of the taunts that they kept repeating was calling him a junkie. They saw him as undeserving of their empathy because he was, in their mind, just a junkie. And because they had, much like every other American, grown up being fed a steady diet of junkies are bad, addiction is a moral failing, talking points, they collectively came to the conclusion that allowing him to drown was, in fact, the moral decision to make. One fewer junkie in the world was a net positive in their mind, and therefore their inaction was an act of morality. Which brings me to my next point, what constitutes morality on the left versus right. To discuss this, we're going to use psychologist Jonathan Haidt's moral foundation theory, or MFT, which proposes that morality is actually a system built on 6 foundational building blocks: care versus harm, fairness versus cheating, loyalty versus betrayal, authority versus subversion, sanctity versus degradation, and liberty versus oppression. Under MFT, morality is something that we each build for ourselves by choosing where we fall on the spectrum of each of those 6 foundational blocks. Think of it sort of like a video game where you're given a certain number of points to spend choosing your character's attributes or skills. Would you rather be better at sneaking or at using melee weapons? Would you rather be better at solving puzzles or punching enemies' lights out? Do you prioritize charisma or endurance? According to Haidt's work, as well as the subsequent work and studies of lots of psychologists and political scholars, liberals and progressives tend to rely more on the care versus harm and fairness versus cheating foundations when developing our senses of morality, while conservatives tend to rely more on loyalty versus betrayal, authority versus subversion, and sanctity versus degradation. Both sides of the political divide equally value liberty versus oppression, although how that presents for each side looks very different. Once you start applying those foundations, and the weight that each side of the political divide places on each of them to actual policy debates, it quickly becomes very clear how and why the left and right keep talking past one another. Democrats say that attempts to defund Medicaid show that conservatives don't care about low-income Americans, while Republicans say that the income taxes that fund Medicaid are a violation of their liberty. Democrats say that protesting in front of Tesla dealerships is a valid response to a government that is treating people unfairly, while Republicans see those protests as a lack of loyalty to the current administration and an eschewing of their authority. Democrats see denying immigrants due process and deporting innocent people to El Salvador as causing immense harm and perpetuating an incredibly unfair system, while Republicans see immigrants as an affront to our country's sanctity, and any attempts by the judicial system to mitigate further harm as an attack on Trump's authority and a show of disloyalty to our country. And meanwhile, both sides of the political divide continue to believe, at our very core, that it is our side that is acting morally and their side that is being monsters. None of what I'm saying, by the way, is meant to justify literally any of the actions of the Trump administration or make excuses for the people gleefully cheering those actions on. There are absolutely people in Trump's base who are irredeemably cruel and who embrace Trump's most immoral policies specifically because they are immoral and will inflict maximum harm on the marginalized communities that they hate most. But saving our democracy is going to require we get a lot better at reaching out to and connecting to those on the right who are still savable. And importantly, finding ways to do that without compromising our values. Because right now, there are way too many establishment Democrats who seem to think that reaching these folks requires that we compromise on our values rather than just simply getting better at talking about those values in a way that makes sense to folks with morality systems built on different foundational blocks. We don't need to throw trans folks under the bus. We just need to find ways to defend them that appeal to at least one of the foundational values that make up conservatives' morality. We don't need to look the other way as Trump systematically targets undocumented and documented immigrants. We just need to find ways to defend them that appeal to at least one of those foundational values that make up conservatives' morality. And if you want to see an example of this strategy working in real life and actually connecting with folks, look no further than Tim Walz. Walz famously and repeatedly appealed to conservative morality in defense of women, black and brown folks, and the LGBTQ community when he used the line, "Mind your own damn business." He wasn't asking conservatives to empathize with a woman in need of an abortion or a gay man who just wants to marry their partner, because they don't need to empathize with us in order to side with us, as long as they view it as siding with their own sense of morality, including the importance they put on personal liberty. Because here's the thing. We don't all have to take the same path, as long as we're all headed toward the same goal and final destination. And if we want to actually win this thing and save our democracy, a lot more of us are going to have to learn how to guide conservatives down their path to our goal and final destination, rather than trying to force them to take our path, or even worse, forfeiting what we know should be the final destination to instead join conservatives at theirs because doing otherwise feels too damn hard.